Jake and I had always been more like brothers than cousins, growing up on adjacent farms in the fertile valleys of Oregon's Willamette region. Our grandfathers had been business partners back in the 1950s, dividing a 1,000-acre spread between their two sons, with the understanding that the families would continue working together through the generations. For 30 years, that partnership had been seamless: shared equipment, coordinated planting schedules, and a trust so complete that we barely bothered with written contracts. The Brennan and Walsh farms operated as one unified operation, with Jake managing the eastern parcels while I focused on our western fields. We specialized in premium crops that demanded precise timing and careful attention: organic strawberries, heritage apples, and specialty vegetables that commanded top prices from Portland's farm-to-table restaurants. Our reputation for quality had taken decades to build, and our customer waiting lists stretched longer each year. Jake had always been the more ambitious one, constantly researching new varieties and cultivation techniques that might give us an edge in increasingly competitive markets. I was the steady hand, focused on perfecting our existing systems and maintaining the meticulous records that organic certification required. Together, we made an effective team, his innovation balanced by my attention to detail. Our families lived less than a mile apart, connected by a dirt road that ran between our property lines. Our children played together, our wives shared gardening tips, and holidays brought both clans together around tables, groaning under the weight of food we'd grown with our own hands. The farms weren't just our livelihood, they were the foundation of an extended family that had weathered everything from market crashes to devastating floods. That trust, built over 3 decades of shared success and mutual support, made what happened next so devastating. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of inflicting the deepest wounds. Block 2. The competition arrives. Everything changed when Cascade Valley Organics announced plans to build a massive processing facility just 20 miles south of our farms. The corporate operation promised to revolutionize organic farming in the region, offering guaranteed contracts and premium prices to growers who could meet their volume requirements. For small family farms like ours, it represented either the opportunity of a lifetime or the beginning of the end for independent agriculture. Jake saw opportunity where I saw threat. He spent hours studying Cascade Valley's requirements, calculating how we might scale up production to meet their standards while maintaining our commitment to sustainable farming practices. The contracts they offered were indeed generous. Guaranteed purchases at prices 30% above current market rates, with built-in escalation clauses that would protect us from inflation. But there was a catch that made my stomach churn with anxiety. Cascade Valley would only contract with individual growers, not partnerships. They wanted direct relationships with farm owners who could guarantee consistent quality and delivery schedules. Our decades-old collaboration, the very foundation of our success, suddenly became an obstacle to the biggest opportunity either of us had ever seen. We could both apply separately, Jake suggested during one of our planning sessions, his enthusiasm barely contained. They need multiple suppliers, and we've got the best reputation in the region. This could set our families up for generations. But I could hear something different in his voice. A competitive edge that had never been there before when we discussed business opportunities. The application process was rigorous, requiring detailed financial statements, soil analysis reports, and production projections that stretched 5 years into the future. Cascade Valley would select only 12 growers from across the entire Pacific Northwest, and Jake and I found ourselves competing against each other for the first time in our lives. The partnership that had sustained our families for 3 decades was about to be tested in ways we'd never imagined. Tamudi B. Block 3. The Growing Rivalry. The months leading up to Cascade Valley's selection process transformed our easy collaboration into something darker and more complicated. Jake threw himself into improving his production systems with an intensity that bordered on obsession, working 18-hour days to demonstrate the efficiency and innovation that might set his application apart from mine and the hundreds of others competing for those coveted contracts. I tried to maintain our traditional cooperation, but Jake's behavior became increasingly secretive. Equipment that we'd always shared suddenly became unavailable when I needed it. Jake claimed his tractors were being serviced or his irrigation systems were running at capacity, forcing me to rent expensive equipment or delay critical fieldwork that could impact my own production numbers. More troubling were the subtle ways Jake began undermining my reputation with our shared customers. He'd mention my conservative approach to farming innovation, or suggest that my commitment to traditional methods might not scale well for larger operations. Restaurant owners who dealt with both of us for years began asking pointed questions about my capacity to meet increased demand or adapt to changing market requirements. The selection process included farm visits from Cascade Valley's technical team, agronomists who would evaluate our operations and make recommendations about our suitability for partnership. Jake's tour went beautifully, his fields were immaculate, his equipment was perfectly maintained, and his production records showed steady growth over the past 5 years. My inspection, scheduled for the following week, would tell a different story. But I had no way of knowing that Jake had already begun implementing a plan that would ensure his success at the cost of my destruction. The cousin I'd trusted with my life was about to betray that trust in the most devastating way imaginable. Block 4, the perfect setup. The sabotage began with something so subtle I almost missed it entirely. Jake offered to help me prepare for my Cascade Valley inspection, suggesting we coordinate our pesticide applications to ensure both farms showed optimal crop health during the critical evaluation period. His concern seemed genuine, even touching. Evidence that despite the growing competition between us, family loyalty still mattered more than business rivalry. "Let's time our spray schedules perfectly," he said, spreading aerial maps of both properties across my kitchen table. "If we apply treatment simultaneously, the inspectors will see 2 operations working in perfect harmony. It'll demonstrate our professionalism and attention to detail." His logic was sound, and I was grateful for any advantage that might improve my chances of selection. Jake volunteered to handle the pesticide procurement for both farms, leveraging our combined volume to get better prices on the organic-approved treatments our crops required. It was the kind of cost-saving cooperation we'd practiced for years, and I appreciated his willingness to maintain our partnership even while competing for the same opportunity. The chemicals arrived on a Tuesday morning in unmarked white containers, each carefully labeled with application rates and timing instructions in Jake's familiar handwriting. He'd chosen a selective fungicide approved for organic operations, designed to prevent the leaf spot diseases that could devastate berry crops during Oregon's unpredictable spring weather patterns. "Apply this Saturday morning," Jake instructed, handing me containers that would cover my entire strawberry operation. "Weather Service is predicting perfect conditions, no wind, moderate temperatures, low humidity. The timing couldn't be better." I trusted his judgment completely. Jake had always been more knowledgeable about chemical applications than I was, and his track record with pest management was impeccable. I had no reason to suspect that the labels on my containers contained instructions for a herbicide that would destroy everything I'd worked 30 years to build. Anduri Tukis Block 5, the application day. Saturday morning dawned perfect for pesticide application. Calm winds, moderate temperatures, and clear skies that promised optimal absorption and minimal drift. I loaded my spray equipment with the solution Jake had prepared, following his detailed instructions about mixing ratios and application timing. Everything felt routine, professional, exactly the kind of coordinated effort that had made our partnership so successful over the decades. My strawberry field stretched across 40 acres of Prime Valley bottom, plants heavy with developing fruit that represented not just this year's income, but my entire application to Cascade Valley Organics. These weren't just any strawberries. They were heritage varieties I'd spent 15 years perfecting, genetic treasures that produced fruit so exceptional that Portland's finest restaurants would pay premium prices for the privilege of featuring them on their menus. The spray application went smoothly, my equipment delivering an even coating across row after row of healthy plants. The chemical mixture looked exactly like the fungicides I'd used countless times before, clear, odorless, and designed to protect rather than destroy. I worked methodically through the morning, covering every plant with the same attention to detail I'd brought to farming for 3 decades. By noon, I'd completed the entire application and cleaned my equipment according to the detailed protocols Jake had provided. The fields looked perfect, ready for the Cascade Valley inspection that would determine my family's future. I called Jake to confirm that his application had gone equally well, and his enthusiastic response reassured me that we'd both taken important steps toward securing our places in the new organic economy. That evening, I walked through my strawberry fields with the satisfaction of work well done. The plants looked healthy and vigorous, their leaves showing the slight sheen that indicated proper chemical coverage. In 3 days, Cascade Valley's technical team would tour these same fields, and I was confident they'd see an operation worthy of their premium contracts. I had no idea I was looking at plants that were already dying. Herbicide C Block 6, the first signs. The first signs of trouble appeared on Monday morning, subtle enough that I initially dismissed them as normal variation in plant health. A few strawberry plants in the center of my northernmost field showed slight yellowing around their leaf edges, the kind of minor stress that could result from anything from soil moisture fluctuations to minor nutrient deficiencies. By Tuesday, the yellowing had spread and intensified, affecting hundreds of plants across multiple rows. The pattern was uniform and systematic, exactly what you'd expect from a chemical application rather than a natural disease outbreak. But that made no sense. Jake had provided detailed instructions for applying an organic-approved fungicide that should have improved plant health, not damaged it. Wednesday brought horror as the full scope of the disaster became clear. Entire sections of my strawberry fields were dying, their leaves curling and browning in ways that suggested severe herbicide damage. The heritage varieties I'd spent 15 years developing were withering before my eyes, their genetic treasures lost to what appeared to be systematic poisoning. I called Jake in panic, describing the catastrophic damage that had appeared seemingly overnight. His response was perfectly crafted: shock, sympathy, and immediate offers to help investigate what might have gone wrong. Maybe there was contamination in the chemical shipment, he suggested, or possibly spray drift from a neighboring operation using conventional herbicides. But even as Jake expressed concern and offered assistance, I began noticing details that didn't fit his explanations. His own fields, treated the same day with supposedly identical chemicals, showed no signs of damage. His strawberry plants remained healthy and vigorous, their leaves showing the kind of perfect condition I'd expected in my own fields. The Cascade Valley inspection was scheduled for Friday morning, just 2 days away. Instead of showcasing the most beautiful strawberry operation in the region, I'd be explaining why 40 acres of premium crops looked like they'd been deliberately poisoned. Herbicide Block 7, the investigation. The Cascade Valley inspection team arrived Friday morning to survey what could only be described as an agricultural disaster. Dr. Sarah Chen, their lead agronomist, walked through my dying strawberry fields with the grim expression of someone documenting a crime scene rather than evaluating a potential business partner. Her questions were probing and technical, focused on understanding how such systematic damage could have occurred. "This pattern suggests herbicide contamination," she explained, photographing the uniform damage that stretched across 40 acres of what had been perfect crops just days earlier. "The symptoms are consistent with glyphosate exposure, but that's impossible if you're maintaining organic certification. Glyphosate use would violate every standard you claim to follow." I explained the pesticide application Jake had coordinated, showing Dr. Chen the containers and instructions he'd provided. She examined the labels carefully, taking photographs and making notes that would become part of my permanent record with Cascade Valley. "These instructions are for fungicide application," she confirmed, "but the damage pattern suggests something much more aggressive." Dr. Chen collected soil and plant samples for laboratory analysis, explaining that definitive identification of the contaminating chemical would take several days. But her preliminary assessment was devastating. Regardless of what had caused the damage, my operation couldn't possibly meet Cascade Valley's quality standards. The contract I'd spent months pursuing was lost before we'd even completed the inspection tour. "I'm sorry," she said as her team prepared to leave. "Your reputation for quality is excellent, and this situation appears to be some kind of accident or contamination event. But we can't risk our supply chain on operations that show this kind of instability." Her business card included contact information for agricultural insurance adjusters and environmental consultants who specialized in chemical contamination cases. As I watched their vehicles disappear down our farm road, I realized that losing the Cascade Valley contract was just the beginning of my problems. Organic certification agencies would demand their own investigation, and my existing customers would have serious questions about chemical contamination on what was supposed to be a pristine organic operation. And it is Secret Block 8, the discovery. The laboratory results arrived the following Tuesday, confirming my worst suspicions while revealing the true scope of Jake's betrayal. Dr. Chen's samples contained high concentrations of dicamba, a powerful herbicide that was devastating to broadleaf crops like strawberries, but completely harmless to the grass seed operations that dominated our region's agricultural economy. Dicamba wasn't just any herbicide. It was specifically chosen for maximum damage to my operation while leaving Jake's fields completely unaffected. The chemical was highly volatile and prone to drift, meaning contamination could theoretically have come from neighboring operations miles away. Any investigation would focus on accidental exposure rather than deliberate sabotage, giving Jake perfect cover for his betrayal. But the label analysis revealed the smoking gun that proved Jake's guilt beyond any doubt. The containers he'd provided were original fungicide packages that had been carefully opened, emptied, and refilled with dicamba solution. The adhesive residue, where original labels had been removed and replaced, was invisible to casual inspection, but obvious under laboratory conditions. Jake had spent weeks planning this sabotage, researching chemicals that would destroy my crops while appearing to be accidental contamination. He'd chosen dicamba specifically because it was commonly used in our region, making deliberate poisoning nearly impossible to prove. The timing of the application ensured maximum damage during my critical inspection period while giving him plausible deniability about the source of contamination. Most devastatingly, Jake's plan included provisions for his own protection and advancement. While my operation collapsed under chemical contamination, his pristine fields would showcase exactly the kind of quality and reliability Cascade Valley demanded. He wouldn't just win the contract I'd lost, he'd benefit directly from my destruction. The cousin I'd trusted like a brother had systematically planned my ruin, using 3 decades of shared knowledge and cooperation to engineer the perfect betrayal. Block 9. The Confrontation. I drove to Jake's farm on Wednesday morning with laboratory reports that proved his guilt and a heart heavy with 30 years of betrayed trust. His farmhouse looked exactly the same as it had throughout our childhood. Weathered cedar siding, wraparound porch, flower beds that his wife tended with the same care we brought to our commercial crops. Nothing about the exterior suggested the calculating criminal who lived inside. Jake was in his equipment shed, servicing the same spray rig he'd used to apply legitimate fungicide to his own fields while I poisoned mine with his doctored chemicals. He looked up with apparent surprise when I appeared in the doorway, his expression perfectly calibrated to suggest innocent concern about my continuing crisis. "Any word on what caused the contamination?" he asked, his voice carrying just the right mixture of sympathy and curiosity. "I've been worried sick about you since the inspection. Is there anything I can do to help with cleanup or replanting?" His performance was flawless, exactly what I'd expect from someone who'd spent weeks preparing for this conversation. I placed the laboratory reports on his workbench without saying a word, watching his face as he read documentation of his own betrayal. The technical language was clear and damning. Deliberate substitution of dicamba herbicide for fungicide, with chemical fingerprints that matched products available from his usual suppliers. For a moment, Jake's mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating that I'd never seen in 30 years of partnership. Then his face rearranged itself into expressions of shock and confusion, as if he couldn't possibly understand how such evidence had come to exist. "This has to be some kind of mistake," he said, but his voice lacked the conviction that genuine surprise would have carried. "You destroyed my crops," I said quietly, my words hanging in the air between us like an executioner's blade. "You poisoned 40 acres of strawberries and ruined my Cascade Valley contract. You planned this whole thing." Jake started to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. Some betrayals are too complete for explanations or apologies. Block 10. The Legal Reckoning. The criminal investigation that followed moved with surprising speed, driven by Dr. Chen's detailed documentation and the laboratory evidence that proved deliberate sabotage. The Sheriff's Department treated the case as agricultural terrorism, recognizing that chemical contamination crimes threatened not just individual farmers, but the integrity of organic certification systems that protected consumer trust. Jake hired an expensive attorney from Portland who specialized in agricultural law, crafting a defense strategy based on alternative explanations and reasonable doubt. They suggested that chemical contamination could have resulted from spray drift, equipment malfunction, or even deliberate poisoning by unknown parties who wanted to damage both our operations. The dicamba could have come from anywhere, they argued, and the label substitution might have been done by saboteurs targeting our entire region. But the evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. Dr. Chen's team had photographed everything, from the chemical residue on container surfaces to the precise pattern of plant damage that proved intentional application rather than accidental drift. The laboratory analysis showed chemical fingerprints that matched Jake's usual suppliers, and phone records revealed his purchase of dicamba just days before the sabotage. Most damaging was Jake's own behavior following the discovery. A truly innocent person would have demanded investigation, shared supplier information, and helped identify potential sources of contamination. Instead, Jake had deflected questions, avoided cooperation, and shown no genuine interest in preventing similar incidents on his own operation. The district attorney filed charges for criminal mischief, agricultural terrorism, and fraud related to the organic certification violations Jake's sabotage had caused. The potential penalties included substantial fines, restitution for crop losses, and possible prison time that would destroy Jake's reputation in the agricultural community we'd both served for decades. But the legal process couldn't repair the deeper damage Jake had inflicted on our family relationships and the trust that had sustained our farming partnership for 3 generations. And DZ, Block 11, the community response news of Jake's criminal charges spread through our agricultural community like wildfire, shocking neighbors who'd known both our families for generations. The betrayal felt personal to everyone who'd built their operations on cooperation and mutual trust, values that Jake had systematically exploited to engineer my destruction. Many of our shared customers immediately cancelled contracts with Jake's operation, unwilling to do business with someone who'd proven capable of such calculated sabotage. Restaurants that had featured our farms as examples of sustainable family agriculture quietly removed references to the Brennan operation from their marketing materials, protecting their own reputations from association with agricultural terrorism. The Oregon Organic Certification Association launched their own investigation, recognizing that chemical contamination crimes threatened the integrity of organic standards throughout the region. Jake's organic certification was suspended pending resolution of the criminal charges, effectively ending his ability to serve premium markets that had sustained his operation for decades. Meanwhile, Cascade Valley Organics made an unprecedented decision to reconsider my application despite the contamination disaster. Dr. Chen's investigation had documented not just Jake's sabotage, but my own meticulous record-keeping and quality control systems that had made the crime's detection possible. Your response to this crisis demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and professionalism we're looking for, she explained during a follow-up meeting. The contract offer that followed included provisions for financial assistance with replanting costs and soil remediation, recognizing that I'd been the victim of circumstances beyond my control. Cascade Valley wanted to send a message that their organization wouldn't be deterred by sabotage or intimidation, and they saw my operation as a symbol of resilience in the face of agricultural terrorism. But the sweetest validation came from neighboring farmers who offered equipment, labor, and expertise to help rebuild what Jake had destroyed, proving that genuine cooperation couldn't be poisoned by one man's betrayal. Block 12, the rebuilding. Replanting 40 acres of heritage strawberries required more than just financial resources. It demanded a complete reconstruction of genetic treasures that had taken 15 years to develop. The varieties Jake had destroyed existed nowhere else in the region, their unique characteristics the result of careful selection and cultivation that couldn't be quickly replaced. Fortunately, I'd maintained mother plants in protected greenhouse environments, preserving the genetic foundation for rebuilding my strawberry operation. The process would take 3 years to reach full production capacity, but Cascade Valley's contract provided guaranteed income during the recovery period, ensuring my family's financial stability while I reconstructed what Jake had destroyed. The soil remediation proved more challenging than replanting, requiring extensive testing and treatment to eliminate dicamba residue that could continue damaging sensitive crops for months after application. Agricultural extension specialists worked with me to design a recovery program that would restore soil health while maintaining organic certification standards. Jake's criminal trial proceeded through the winter, generating media coverage that exposed the vulnerability of organic farming operations to deliberate sabotage. The case became a landmark prosecution for agricultural terrorism, establishing legal precedents that would protect other farmers from similar betrayals. The most difficult part of rebuilding was psychological rather than agricultural. Jake's betrayal had shattered assumptions about trust and cooperation that had guided my approach to farming for 3 decades. Working with new partners and suppliers required constant vigilance against paranoia, balancing necessary caution with the openness that made agricultural cooperation possible. But gradually,